You invade a country. You're a superpower. You spend nearly $1 trillion on the military, and you want to flex the muscle of that military. You want a muscular military. And so you invade a country. You punch a country in the face. Congratulations. Now, you decide, not just one country, you're filling your oats, so you go to another one, and another one, and another one. But let's go back to the first one for the moment. The people in that country don't want you there. You are effectively an invader to that particular country. And you are fighting against some enemy, some bad guy in that country. Now, what do you care more about? Are you a capitalist or are you an imperialist? Meaning, is it more geopolitics to you, or is it more about we want to flex our will and impose our will into these various countries? If you are anything like our current politicians, you try to be this utopian vision of both. Now, this is like believing in magical things in some part. First question. Now that you've invaded this country, you need infrastructure. You need power. You need water. You need cell towers. You need all of these various things that a military lives off. Meaning you may have a group of people who are there fighting that war, but you also have a group of there supporting the people who are fighting that war. The engineers of sorts. The people who build the roads and whatnot. The military, if it was me, would be self-sufficient. Meaning, it wouldn't be a situation where the military is relying on other things. The military can defend itself. The military can protect itself. The military, for the most part, used to have the capacity to do and handle all of these various issues that I'm talking about. But the catch here is, we're in neoliberal politics. And this is Democrat and Republican. And so they say, hey, this is a great way to make a buck. And so they start privatizing elements even of the military. And when you privatize elements of the military, now you have a contractor who's doing a job. Now that contractor is going to have civilians in those areas in a war zone. Question: how do they stay safe? Right? I mean, after all, if you have a company, let's say you have 2 or 3 companies, maybe 4, working in those areas, and they bring people from the United States or from somewhere else, and they have those people working in the capacity of the company in those war zones, how do you keep those people safe? They may be driving from pillar to post. They may be all over the country. How do you keep them safe when there are people who want to chop off their heads, or at the very least put a bullet in them? Well, therein lies the rub, right? If the military itself was doing it, the military, for the most part, can come up with ways to keep itself safe. Well, the company, at this point, has to come up with the responsibility to keep that guy safe. Now, if you're the company, what's your first thought? Bottom line. I am in this venture not to do whatever we were here to do for the war. I am in this venture to make as much cash off the public purse as I can possibly make. And the more money that I have to pay out to defense security forces, that's less money that's eaten to my profits, dog. So I need to find the cheapest way possible to get out of this situation. One of the people who the military is there to fight in that war zone comes to the company and say, hey, look, I make a deal with you. I'll leave your people alone. You can travel through here safely. Got to give me money, though. Give me cash. I'll leave you to your devices in this war zone. And the company, who's looking for the bottom line and the cheapest way to keep their guy safe, they say, deal. Now, the catch here is they're making a deal with the people that the military, state, our government, is there to engage and to fight. What's wrong with this picture? There's all sorts of wrong here. But what's wrong with this picture? Fact is, everybody here is rational actors, with the exception that it is massively irrational to be having these defense contractors in these areas. You need to privatize everything? And at which point does privatization tread across the line of just being not in the interest of the country itself to have various things privatized. This is reality, actually. And this happened a few times, this kind of protection racket. If you remember, I distinctly remember this story that Fox News ran, and it made the point that Obama was running weapons into the various territories in Syria, and that ISIS and Al-Qaeda was getting their hands on those weapons. In some cases, clearly, Obama was running weapons to terrorists, but in this very specific case that Fox News was running, that the person was giving weapons over to ISIS and Al-Qaeda for safe passage. These are dangerous areas. You don't have control over all of this territory. And these people are going to kill me. So yes, I will give you this truckload of weapons if you allow me to keep this other truckload of weapons. And they will make that deal. My point is, our defense contractors were doing the exact same thing. I give you money. You leave my guy alone to operate in this war zone. I understand that we're fighting you, but that's a military thing. This is a business relationship. In one of the cases, and let's flip it over first, and I'll tell you exactly what I mean. This is taking place in Afghanistan. Effectively, Gold Star families are suing defense contractors, saying that you guys were essentially paying money to the Taliban, and that is illegal under our laws because, we're fighting the Taliban, and so the act of you paying money is essentially helping the people who we're here fighting. Now, there's logic to it, but the problem here is that there's also a logic to the fact that you got to pay the money. Like, think of what we're saying here. It's like the belief in magical things. Ultimately, we're putting people in hostile situations. All right, we're putting civilians in war zones. Great. And you invariably hit the issue of, I need to keep the guy safe. Is the military going to keep the guy safe? Well, if the military is going to come up with ways to keep the guy safe, okay, fair enough. But if they are not, and if you're supposed to deal with this on your own, because after all, if the military is doing this, they're probably trying to save a buck for some reason, seeing as they're spending nearly $1 trillion a year. But this, deification of markets. If the military is not going to do it, then the company has to do it. Now, the company is going to look for the cheapest way to keep that guy safe. And the companies have made the argument that this is how business is done. This is just what's done. This is not... Sometimes they will pay security forces. Those security forces will turn around and pay warlords in the area for the exact same effect. These companies are being sued. And it is unclear how this entirely is going to turn out. It's the weirdest thing in the world. So it's illegal under Federal Anti-Terrorism Act to provide material support for the Taliban. The United States has warned defense contractors that protection payments are against the law, but according to the lawsuit, the practice has proliferated because defense contractors feels it's the cost of doing business. You're in a foreign country. You're in a hostile foreign country because you've invaded that country. I mean, it's not on the border of Oklahoma. And yes, because you've invaded that country, people are going to try to eject you out of the country to which you have invaded. They don't want you there. And after learning about what has taken place in Afghan files over the last 3 presidents, they've all been lying. They've been lying through their teeth. We've been failing miserably in Afghanistan. It's time to call it a day. Bring our troops home. Film a parade. The part at the bottom, though, is laughable. But let me get to this part first. Defendants supported the Taliban for a simple reason. Defendants are all large Western companies with lucrative businesses in post-9/11 Afghanistan, and they all paid the Taliban to refrain from attacking their business interests. The complaint said those protection payments aided and abetted terrorism by directly funding Al-Qaeda-backed Taliban insurgency that killed and injured thousands of Americans. This is all sorts of fucked up. It was cheaper to pay them off as opposed to deal with the business interests being destroyed. Now, if you were a company and you took this job and you have to pay for your own security services to keep your people safe, those people are working literally within a war zone. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And what is it? And I got to be honest, in an odd way, if they didn't do this, let's say it that way, the company doesn't do this, and the company has the security services, essentially, I don't know, get teams in order to go out with the people who need to go from pillar to post or in these various areas, or to secure their businesses, I suppose you end up with either firefights, or bombings, or essentially just attacks on those business interests. The problem is that their business is in a fucking war zone. Like, that's the issue. Like, yes, you can sue the families, but the business is not about, there's no patriotism there. It's not about what's best for America. It's how do we make a buck? How do we make a buck? And in all of those situations, regardless of how bad that situation is, they're thinking, how do we make a buck? And fact of the matter is, having to defend Bob in that war zone is a drag on their bottom line. Of course, they're going to pay off the Taliban if that allows them to operate there. Right and wrong doesn't apply. It's just what's in their material best interest, because again, it's a company. Their point of existence is their literal material best interest. So, right here, this is the catch. In addition to making protection payments, one company, the telecommunication firm MTN Group, has been accused of deactivating its cellular towers at night at the request of the Taliban, which believed the U.S. forces were using the cellular networks to track insurgents. Now think about what that means, and think about what all this means for the moment. If the companies are terrified, for the most part, that means the companies are acting under threat. Well, how far does that under threat acting go? Meaning, at which point does a company relent and say, yeah, we're not going to pay you this? Ultimately, you're paying because you're scared that these guys are going to destroy your business interests. By the same token, does that have other consequences in regards to what they can get the companies to do? In this case, the argument is that they turned those cellular towers off at the request of the Taliban, despite the fact that the U.S. military was using, again, depending on a private company, that's interest is profit. The U.S. military was dependent on those towers in order to track Taliban. Right here, this gentleman, Andrew Bejovic. I've read this guy's book. This guy's awesome. I love this guy. The central issue here is the Pentagon. Oh, is that him? Is that him? That name is so familiar, and I think I've read one of his books, but I could be wrong. The central issue here is the Pentagon's reliance on contractors in war zones. Yes, said Andrew Bejovic, Professor Emeritus of International Relations and History at Boston University. In the old days, the U.S. military, when it went into a war, was largely self-sufficient. Today, the U.S. military is heavily dependent on profit-making enterprises, which inevitably privilege the bottom line over other considerations. I don't know whether the evidence will sustain the plaintiffs in the case, but I sure wouldn't be surprised. Essentially, they're extortion rackets. Now, this part is ludicrous, though. A related lawsuit filed Friday on behalf of Gold Star families and dozens of veterans accused the Iranian government of providing material support for Al-Qaeda. You're in a war! You're in a war! You're a soldier in a war! Are you fucking kidding me? How are you going to sue Iran? You've invaded. Are you fucking kidding me? That part gets absurd. We toppled the Iranian government. That was real. That happened. We did that. We did that because they wanted a little bit more of the cut of the oil that was there, and we did not want to allow them to have that. The United States and Britain toppled that government. They took it back. Now, instead of going back to this kind of more democratic government, they ended up with the Shah. So this notion that Iran was always like that. I'm sorry. Ayatollah, I'm sorry. They ended up with Ayatollah. But this notion that Iran was always this way under this kind of religious rulership, nonsense. We have been putting a pressure campaign. We have been threatening them for years John McCain was out there screaming bomb, 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 bomb Iran, as if those bombs don't have any consequences from the standpoint of murdering people. And you believe that they shouldn't respond. This is why I'm always amazed at America on this stuff. It's as if we drop the context of our actions when we're talking about the world. So we're the good guys. We're right, as opposed to everybody in the pool being sharks. And we're going to go so far as to say, I'm going to sue Iran because Iran, they were supporting people that we didn't particularly like. We are literally in someone else's country. We have literally just killed, 22 or 32 people or something to that effect, or 25 people in these bombing raids. We are in other people's countries. Understand what I mean by that? How many military bases are in America from other countries? 0. None. Not one. Not one. How are you going to sue Iran? Your adversaries, your enemies in this case. And by the way, not their fault. Not their fault. They're not the aggressors in this. If you want to go to this very specific instance right now, you have a pressure campaign that Donald Trump has put on where he has browbeat, attacked, and has done everything he could to destroy the economy of that country. It's utterly ludicrous. Are people going to be able to sue America? Is Iraq going to be able to sue America for the damages to Iraq and for the people that have been killed and slaughtered? What about Syria? Can Syria sue America for paying those terrorists, especially if you can prove that they paid those terrorists, which you can definitely do, that they were funding head choppers? I mean, what does this end? What about South America? Do South American countries, Guatemala, Chile, Bolivia, do all of these countries get to sue America? Brazil? How about Iran? Does Iran get to sue America for damages for the last coup that they proffered? Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. You're not even being serious now. If you want to sue defense contractors for a policy decision fuck up that your government did by allowing these guys to get in here and try to make money at the expense of the workers who are going to be there in those war zones, fair enough. Have at it. You're right. They were paying Taliban in order to prevent themselves from being killed or prevent their business interests from being taken down. But again, it's a business after all. Your interest is different. When people talk about this notion of capitalism and freedom, I don't know what they're talking about, or democracy and capitalism. These things don't rest well together. I hope you realize that. This accumulation of wealth from the top 1% is unaccountable. That is literally the difference. Or different than this notion of democratic process where multiple voices get to have a say and it's one man, one vote, and you push. Those are different. It is a democratic choice, to some degree, to send soldiers into a war zone. It is a capitalistic choice to say, yeah, I know you guys are fighting these guys, but we got to make a buck, dog, and it'll hurt our profits if, these people get killed. So yeah, we're going to pay our enemies, in this case, sorry, U.S., their interests are different. One is you can call it democratic choice, and I guess it's not even a democratic choice. It's a choice by the president. But it's at the very least a choice by state. The other one is people who are just trying to make a buck. And despite whatever your objectives were in sending the soldiers there, from the standpoint of state, the company is there to make a buck. Patriotism is not to be found. This is to make a buck. Those two things are very, very different. I mean, if a decision was made to pass Medicare for all, and Sanders increased the tax rate, where the tax rate was going to go higher the more money that you earned or the more money that you matter or had, that's a democratic choice. The capitalists will hate that choice because they think you're infringing on their cash. You're trying to take my cash, dog. I want to keep my cash. The cash allows them to be, for the most part, an unaccountable 1%. It's their domain. This is mine, private. As opposed to the democratic choice that says, well, yeah, but now we're going to have a wealth tax, and now we're going to pass Medicare for all, and now we're going to expand education for the people who want to go to free public schools. And yes, you're going to have to pay more in order to make that work. You can understand why oligarchs, for the most part, try to get their hands into the political process. At the very least, if you are paying the various people in the political parties, whatnot, in order to toe a certain particular disposition, either tax cuts, whether you're Democrat or Republican, enshrining those tax cuts in the law when Democrats get into office, you, for the most part, can control the political process and give a fig leaf or a patina of democracy, despite the fact that all of the people who are making those decisions are millionaires, some of them hundreds of millionaires, and all of them have a very particular point of view of the world. Even the media class, same thing. It's a big club. It's like a Hunger Games. All of these guys are kind of in their own space. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the democratic process doesn't work, nor does it mean that an energized public can't necessarily yank the reins back and put it into a sense of priorities. But it just needs to be very clear. The capitalist class hates the fact that the voting public can make those choices of Medicare for all, can raise taxes, can increase the amount that's going to Social Security. They hate that. They have an entire party dedicated to pushing forth their will on this, meaning the Republican Party, and at the very least 3/4 of a Democratic Party that also pushes that will. This is the reason why for the last 40, 50 years you've had this trend to the right in regards to policy, be it Democrats and Republicans. Republicans have just become fucking batshit crazy, and Democrats have become Republicans. All right, I'm going to end this here. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all. And Happy New Year's. What time is it? 4 minutes to New Year's in California. Happy New Year, all.